So guys, today I'm doing things a little bit differently. You can see wifey. Wifey. You know, I've been trying to figure out how to start this video and how to talk about it because my standards of my audio journey have been changing, which is exciting. But how do I convey that to you guys and how do I talk about how it's changing and what's going on? It's really exciting when what you knew as the norm and the best and what your goals were before move as you get exposed to better equipment and better gear and better systems and better setups. And that's what's happened to me with today's review. I'm talking about the Stealth audio cables, specifically today's topic, their Ethernet cable. So let me talk a little bit about the process of burning in the cables and the tuning of the cables. I'm a big believer that more is better when it comes to burn-in. And so what I did is I put about 500 hours on the cable of burning them in to make sure that they were really broken in and at their prime. I know the manufacturer Stealth recommends about 3 weeks on its cables of just letting it play through music or whatever. And so I figured just 500 hours, nice round number, go from there. What I did is first I listened to my reference track, which is Above and Beyond, Liquid Love. You've heard me talk about why I love that track so many times on my other videos. It's a phenomenal track. It's really complex. There's a lot of moving pieces, and it's interesting. I call it a chameleon track because it sounds really blah and boring when your system isn't right, and when your system is right, it's a phenomenal recording. So I started with the slider all the way over to one end. Then I moved it in 6-inch increments. I believe it's 1.5 meter cable. And when it started to get better, I then I made the increments smaller down to 3 inches, then 2 inches. And then when it started to go the other way in terms of sound quality, I then moved it back and I eventually got it down to within 1/4 inch increments and got it just right. Started with the tunable one. It went from, when the slider was all the way at one end, it went from completely lifeless and dull to sounding what I'm about to describe to you in the next cut. And then it went, when I went too far beyond the prime spot, it started to sound very sibilant and harsh. So it's amazing the difference in sounds when you move that slider. And it was really interesting to hear it. All in all, it took about 1.5 hours to get it just right. All right, so now let's get down to the really important part. How does it sound? I've been listening at length between the Telegartner and the Siltech cable. I've listened to probably over 30 different Ethernet cables from Shunyata, Wire World, you name it, we've tried it. Inexpensive, expensive. And the Telegartner was a really good cable. I'd say probably beats 85%, 90% of the cables. The Siltech has been my reigning champ. The Siltech, I love that Siltech. It just brings a calmness to the music. And up to this point was the least sibilant and harsh cable. I'm very sensitive to the digital sibilance that so many cables and systems have. When I put in the Stealth cable, it sounded flat and lifeless. I went through the process I described earlier in terms of how to getting it tuned. And guys, when I got it tuned just right, it was really different. It was really interesting in the sense that as good as the Siltech, and look, let me take that back. The Siltech is a great cable. Guys, I'm gonna be honest with you, I could live happily with that Siltech for the rest of my life. It is a great cable, and I think it probably beats 99% of the cables out there to my ear in my system. But when I put the Stealth on, all of a sudden, in comparison, the Siltech, which had been the smoothest sounding cable and the least sibilant sounding cable I had heard up till now, the Siltech sounded sibilant in comparison. The voices sounded much more natural when it was tuned just right on the Stealth than on the Siltech.
Loading, strike with the lyrics like I'm bowling. Keep pushing on, keep rolling. And when I listen, but I told him one more time. Your favorite MCs, bronze or silver. These raps here are golden. Cards on the table, there's no folders. Spit bars at the club, zoning. TikTok come to London, get ripped off. Man, get pissed off when I start lift off. Sweet like flavors.
In the opening of the song, the Above and Beyond, when you have the audience, the Siltech sounded almost a little bit more, I want to say, tilted up. And again, this is only in comparison to the Stealth. Tilted up in the high frequencies, which is interesting because I never felt as though they were compared to anything else. So the audience sounded a little bit more detailed on the Siltech than on the Stealth. But when I would go back and forth, I felt as though it sounded more natural on the Stealth than on the Siltech. So it was, again, you're splitting hairs here. Once I heard the Stealth tuned just right, I found it tough to go back to the Siltech, because now I'm hearing things in the Siltech that the Stealth beat it on that I had never heard before with other cables in my system. So again, we're talking minute percentages here, but when you got a system that's dialed in, you know, we have the RevoPod feet that's getting rid of the vibrations. We've got the speakers that we've laser measured to make sure they're within 1/10 of an inch for positioning. We've got everything dialed in just right on this system. The differences become much more noticeable. And again, I talked about this on my Telegartner review. It's one of those things where once you hear how good it can sound, you can't go back to unhearing it when you switch to other gear. That's where I'm at now, is once I hear how great this Stealth cable sounds, it's tough to go back to anything else. So now let's talk about the difference between the tunable cable, which is what this is, versus more of a plug and play. I think there are going to be a lot of people that like the fact that with some of the other offerings from Stealth, you plug and play. You plug it in, it's ready to go, it's going to sound great. There's nothing wrong with that. But after hearing the tunable, and guys, it was not hard to tune at all. I went into this thinking, oh, is it going to be a little overwhelming? Is it going to be? No, it's really not. The sonic differences are really huge when you pick songs that you're very familiar with. Now, you may drive the wife crazy, as I did, because I played the same song, I don't know, at least 24 times. So I think, oh, my wife just yelled 1,000,000 times. So yes, other than that, it's not a difficult process at all. Like I said, from beginning to end, it only took me about an hour and a half. The tunable version, I think, is a better way to go, because once you get a stereo system and you get it all dialed in, if you change location, if you change cables, power conditioners, gear, houses, you're now going to have a cable that you can tweak and take with you. And I know this isn't the right terminology, but I'm going to say it's upgradable as you go along to tune it to where you want it to be. And of course, we're walking by landscapers right now, as your system changes. So I like the tunable version, and I think when you try it, you will too. So we're back in the studio, and I really wanted to try something different today, and that's why I filmed while I was on the walk outside. I'm trying to convey to you that this journey, this adventure, has really shifted my sense of what I thought was possible, what I thought I liked versus what I really like now, and how much all these different steps have changed my system, what I enjoy, and my expectations. And I felt as though also the outside really signified the difference between my studio setting and the difference between this cable. So in other words, the outside was vastly different from my studio, and this Stealth cable really was different than what I've heard in the past. Yeah, I was impressed when I went up to Mark at Tone Studios Indianapolis. They sounded great, but he had phenomenal gear. I mean, he had Vandersteen 7 Extremes, he had Constellation Audio. I mean, they were excellent. But now that I've got it in my own studio and I've been able to hear it on my own system with what I know to be true, it's really a shift. I love the tunable feature on it. I would say my one tip to you guys, you probably noticed I put a little mark on one of these, is that I measured from here to the other end. So if it ever shifts or anything like that, I keep notes now. It's a reference point. I can keep track of what I like and what I don't. I will tell you, I mean, these are all handmade in the USA. These are all carbon fiber covers and connectors. They are truly in-house with almost everything they do. And they were talking to me. They were saying that they had tried dozens of different metallurgies and materials for the tunable collars to find out what works and what doesn't. And they have them on their power cables, their speaker cables. They have them on a variety of their cables. I'm sold. I think I'm not going to say, oh, it's a game changer or, oh, it's the best I've ever heard. But it took my reference cable, which was the least sibilant, most clear cable I had heard in my system up to this point, and it turned it upside down. Again, we're talking degrees here, but when you start getting into the higher end stuff, little degrees make a big difference. So guys, I can't say enough about the Stealth cables. I'm a believer. I kind of went into it thinking, tunable cable, yeah, whatever. Hearing is believing. And if you are really into this hobby and this audio journey as much as I am, you have to get yourself a pair and you have to try it. It's as simple as that. Just make sure you take the time to really do it right in terms of sliding this and finding what works for you. But I think you are going to be well rewarded in the end. Thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next one.